Tonight, we go in depth on the issue of food insecurity on college campuses. Recent studies show at least 1 in 3 students is dealing with this growing problem. CBS's Elise Preston shows us how one university is serving up a solution.
At the University of California, Davis, students may have an appetite for knowledge, but this line isn't for textbooks. It's to receive food.
Rent is unbelievably expensive, and it's unfortunate that food and groceries and just basic needs costs are so gigantic.
Senior Erin Cashin showed up 90 minutes before the doors opened at the on-campus food pantry.
I literally structure my class schedules around being able to come to the pantry.
It's run by students, many of whom are working here because they found help here.
It feels good to give back and know that I'm needed here.
Can you describe what it feels like when you don't know where your next meal is coming from?
Just really anxious.
Leslie Kemp runs the university's Basic Needs Center. She believes it's important to offer items like fresh produce, some of which is grown on the student farm and donated to the pantry.
$1 today buys a third of the commodities that it bought when I was in school.
There are now close to 800 food pantries on college campuses. A decade ago, there were just 80. UC Davis was one of the first to open up its pantry, buried in the basement. Now the pantry is at the heart of the campus. It's not intended for those with a meal plan or who can afford groceries, but it's open to anyone with a student ID, no questions asked.
Do you fear that people will take advantage of the system?
If we've got 10 students coming in and 3 didn't need it, I'm okay with that, as long as we get those 7 who did need it.
What kind of load does that lift off of you?
Oh, huge.
For Erin Cashin,
A dozen eggs.
she's stretching her dollars, but only taking what she needs.
Pasta.
You're being aware of everyone else who is in this struggle with you.
I think that's kind of what comes with a gift economy. So let me make sure I leave some behind for the next person.
No regrets, no stigma, and one very big benefit.
It would absolutely affect my academic performance. It would definitely affect mental health without being able to do this.
That's certainly food for thought. Elise Preston, CBS News, Davis, California.
Every year, Americans throw out nearly 60 million tons of food. Think about that for a moment. Most of it ends up in landfills. Well, in tonight's Weekend Journal, CBS's Itai Had reports on how a growing number of states are repurposing what's been tossed.
We've got 2 full boxes of sirloin steak.
Most people see expiration dates as the end. But for Will Dittmar, they're just the beginning.
We waste enough food to fill Oracle Stadium on a daily basis. It's unforgivable.
The executive director of an organization called Extra Food, Will collects groceries from supermarkets in San Francisco that would otherwise head to the landfill and delivers them to local nonprofits and pantries.
Let me just pop this off and give you an idea. More prepared, ready to eat meals, meals that need a little bit more love and care before they're ready for your plate. All sorts of good stuff. Thank you.
About a third of U.S. food supply goes uneaten. When it rots in landfills, it produces methane gas. California now requires all supermarkets to give away food that is still fit to eat rather than throw it away. But according to Will, some companies are still dragging their feet.
I don't think anybody or any business likes food waste. At the same time, there also has to be effective enforcement on the back end.
We're still in the education phase.
Alexa Kelty is the zero waste coordinator at San Francisco's Environment Department. She says the city is giving businesses until the end of the year to comply with the law.
You don't want to rush it, because what you're going to end up with is organizations receiving food that may not be as fresh as we'd like it to be.
Today, Will is delivering produce, meats, and baked goods to the Derek Silva community, a nonprofit that helps people living with HIV and other disabilities. The food has been a godsend to residents like Vicente Macias.
For me, this is like glory.
At the end of the day, Will manages to rescue more than 300 pounds of food.
We have the food we need to feed more people. We just have to waste less.
helping those most in need by filling bellies instead of landfills. Itai Had, CBS News, San Francisco.
The World Bank, based in Washington, D.C., is now helping with the transfer of a crucial currency, healthy food. Tonight, Natalie Brand shows us how perfectly good food is going to people in need instead of the landfill.
On a busy week at the World Bank, the kitchen cranks out up to 8,000 meals. What's not consumed, Chef Nick Cavaretta and his team carefully package and prep for donation to organizations in need.
We love statistics here at the World Bank, so we just get a weight on everything so we can monitor exactly how much food gets donated.
Cavaretta estimates up to 900 pounds any given week, 25,000 pounds over the past year.
You showed us all this beautiful food. It would have been painful to throw it away.
Yeah, of course. I mean, perfectly edible.
Volunteers from the organization Food Rescue USDC pick up the leftovers weekly and deliver them on this day to a facility that provides housing to veterans who have experienced homelessness. Lisa Harris, who served in the Air Force, says when her food stamps run low, this is what fills the fridge.
You may not think it, but you never know when you might be in this position. And I'm telling you, not knowing where your food is going to come from, not knowing what you're going to eat, it's hard. It's very hard. And we are appreciative.
Kate Urbank of Food Rescue US's Washington, D.C. chapter says her group serves a dual mission, fighting hunger and climate change by keeping the food out of landfills and redirecting it to nonprofits.
When you think about the fact that 30 to 40% of food is wasted and over 45 million people live in households experiencing food insecurity, it just makes a lot of sense to do the match.
For institutions like the World Bank, where ending poverty is the mission, it's a win-win.
If you can just help one person, it would be like a shame not to do that.
When you got food like this, people, please donate.
Lisa Harris hopes more organizations heed the call. Natalie Brand, CBS News, Washington.
Nancy Chen in Clifton, New Jersey begins our coverage of the rising price of just about everything. Nancy.
Maurice, it has been a persistent problem. Even with inflation slowing, it is nearly impossible to get the same amount of food as you could just a few years ago with that same budget, and American families are making sacrifices.
$2 for one apple.
Each trip to the store is getting harder for Melissa Robinson.
I can't afford to, eat a healthy diet for my kids and for myself. I just buy the minimum, the bare minimum.
These days you're buying the bare minimum.
Yeah.
How hard is it to put food on the table for your family?
I spend at least $250 a week.
We found grocery prices are more than 25% higher than 5 years ago. That's in part because of supply chain issues, increased labor costs, and bird flu outbreaks. Egg prices alone have gone up on average 65% in the past year and are expected to increase 20% more this year, according to the USDA.
Customers don't want any more price increases.
Yes.
They're up to here.
Yeah. Now the threat of tariffs is adding yet another challenge for grocer Stu Leonard Jr., the CEO of his 100-year-old family business. While tariffs on Mexican and Canadian goods are on a 30-day pause, goods from China are now subject to a 10% tariff.
In general, where have you seen the biggest price increases?
What we're just trying to do is keep our prices as tight as we can, not lower quality a bit.
Produce is especially vulnerable to tariffs. In 2023, nearly 60% of the fresh fruit and 35% of the fresh vegetables on store shelves were imported. How do you even operate when there is so much volatility?
I mean, it's very difficult, but we all have to eat.
Are you stockpiling things? How are you planning ahead?
Can't really stockpile, right? Because they're perishables. I always say we're not selling wine. It doesn't get better with age.
Anthony Serafino imports and distributes produce from Latin America.
Goods are more expensive, and they will be passed along to the consumer. So we're just preparing our clientele to make them aware.
Any price increase is a challenge for families already on a tight budget.
We just have to do what we can do, but it's pretty much the bare minimum.
We asked both Serafino and Leonard about what would be hit hardest if there are tariffs on Mexican goods. Both pointed to avocados because we import 90% of this country's supply.
Nancy, let's put tariffs aside for just a second. When people talk about high prices, they talk about supply chains and labor. What does that mean in specific terms?
When it comes to supply chains, it's like what you remember from the pandemic when there are shipping bottlenecks, shrink supplies, which makes what does get through more expensive. Also, when there aren't enough workers, it makes the labor that does get through more expensive. Also important to note that when prices do go up, companies are often reluctant to bring them back down, even if circumstances change.
Is there any hope, Nancy, for prices to ever actually come down?
Unfortunately, not really. While you may see specific individual items go down in price, grocery prices as a whole are here to stay. The economists we spoke with say that the real solution here is waiting for wage increases to outpace price increases, but that could take years.
You can see the impact of inflation most clearly these days at the grocery store. But you can also see it at food banks, where people who never dreamed they'd need it are turning for help. Even some with six-figure incomes are struggling to feed their families. Mark Strassman has tonight's Eye on America from Wallingford, Connecticut.
Forget the image you may have of people who are hungry. In America, hunger is now as mobile as this food bag serving a line 60 deep in Connecticut.
Being under financial stress takes a lot of time, a lot of planning, sometimes.
Take Chandra Kelsey, grocery shopping on a tight budget for her family of 5.
It's whatever's on sale.
Food insecurity eats at her, a lifelong trauma.
You remember going to food banks? Mm-hmm. What was it like?
The first time I did it, I cried. To be in a position where you are doing okay and then you lose everything the next day, it's humbling. It's scary.
And yet you'd never suspect Need has lived with his family.
Household income is roughly?
$150, 2 people working full-time. Sometimes I work 2 jobs.
How can you make $150,000 and be food insecure?
That's not what you bring home after taxes. You know, we have mortgage, insurance. We've got 1 kid on their way to college, 1 in college. Something as small as, $1,000 expense could throw things off significantly. This one's crazy looking.
On and off for a decade, Kelsey has relied on help from Connecticut Food Share, the state's largest food bank. She and 2 of her children now give back by volunteering here. All this food, and it's still not enough. Nationally, more than 50 million people need help getting food from charities like this one. Here in Connecticut, that's 1 in 8 people.
They're your neighbor, they're your friend, they could be your family.
Jason Jakubowski, Connecticut Food Share CEO, told us demand for their food jumped 23% last year. He expects another double-digit increase this year.
Are you seeing more people with higher incomes who need your help?
100%. Many of them come to us and say, I donated to you for years, and I never in a million years thought I would have to use this service.
What has changed?
A lot of economic unpredictability. They're scared about their cost of living is going to go up to. They're scared about what the price of eggs is going to be.
Chandra Kelsey's scared about her job. She works as a program director at the Yale School of Public Health and worries about continued government funding of universities such as hers.
We are trying to be very cognizant that it could be around the corner.
And in its own way, Connecticut Food Share is feeling food insecure. Government DOGE cuts last month slashed nearly $2 million from its food budget.
How do you replace that?
We don't. That's the problem.
Is there any hope here?
We still live in America. People always step up to the plate. It may not be enough food, but we're going to keep doing whatever we can to try to provide.
Provided to more families who never suspected their new worry is their next meal. For Eye on America, I'm Mark Strassman in Wallingford, Connecticut.
According to government data, nearly 50 million Americans lack consistent access to food. Many depend on the charity of food banks. In tonight's In Depth, CBS's Manuel Bajorquez reports federal funding cuts are starving the food banks and those who depend on them of vital resources.
Before sunrise, workers at Feeding South Florida move, load, and stack pallets of food and household goods onto trucks. With the help of volunteers, this flurry of activity has allowed the organization to distribute food to 1.2 million people throughout 4 Florida counties. People like Rosalind Budget, who lives on a fixed income and comes here every 2 months.
I'm able to get a balanced meal in on a daily basis, you know.
And if you didn't have this, what would happen?
I probably would starve.
Starve?
I probably would starve.
But the aid she relies on has been reduced. The Department of Government Efficiency cut funding for about $1 billion worth of USDA programs. For Feeding South Florida, the cuts amount to 40% of its $37 million annual budget.
You're already seeing empty shelves, essentially.
We've been seeing empty racks since February. These cuts have really made an impact, not just on our ability to serve, but on the family's ability to thrive in South Florida and across the country.
Paco Velez is CEO of Feeding South Florida.
It's an unfortunate situation because we see that our families are desperate. They're coming in more frequently than they ever have. And we're trying to maintain as much food as we can, but there is a little desperation.
Dios los bendiga. Gracias. The line of cars for weekly food distribution at Ebenezer Church in South Miami has only gotten longer over the years.
We have sweet potato, we have onions, and everything is fresh.
Pastor Roberto Blanco, who gets part of the supply from the warehouse, is working with less.
Si recibimos menos, entonces damos menos cantidad. So if you get less food, you have to give them a smaller supply. Porque el propósito es que cada familia lleve algo. So they at least can have something. Yeah.
It's affecting farmers too. East Coast Farm and Vegetables near Parkland, Florida, partnered with Feeding South Florida, using federal dollars to pick and pack surplus produce destined for families in need.
This program is a great use of our tax dollars. We are not only helping our farmers here in the States, but you're also feeding families.
Without the funds to process the produce, farmers are hoping crops won't go to waste.
We know that the end goal is to feed people, and we need to work towards that goal.
The goal of reaching those most in need. Manuel Bojorquez, CBS News, Miami.
Those DOGE cuts were supposed to remove fat from the federal budget.
But they also eliminated some healthful foods for the kids and poor. Here's Janet Chamlian.
At Riverside High in Durham, North Carolina, the food is as fresh as can be.
So the cilantro and everything in here in this area is coming from local farmers?
Yes, we can receive local shredded carrots, cucumbers, lettuce, because we feel that we need to support people in our own communities.
Jim Keaton runs the district's nutrition plan and says much of this produce comes from local growers under a USDA program that's been cut by the Trump administration.
When you learned this funding was going away,
immediately my thoughts were, what are we going to do? Because these are funds we use to provide local foods to kids.
Some of that food is grown here at Pine Knot Farms, about an hour's drive from Riverside High. With that funding, the farm sold $150,000 in produce last year to schools and to the local food bank. Linda Leach Hughes keeps the books.
what will the loss of that income mean for you?
It's devastating. If we do not have this extra income coming in to help local folk in the community, then we will have to lay folk off. We can no longer employ folk.
The produce grown here is also what the Food Bank of Central and Eastern North Carolina has relied on. President Amy Barrow says its share of aid, now lost, is $2 million.
I don't understand. We're facing one of the worst hunger crises in decades, and now we're going to increase the need even more. The access to this food makes them not have to choose between the life-saving medicine they need and food for that month.
The concern over who gets fed is especially felt by those who cultivate it.
How are you going to make America great again if you're taking food out of the mouth of babies, senior citizens, nursing homes, rehab centers, hospitals, all of these agencies that are dependent on federal dollars? How are you going to make America great again?
And the USDA has defended these cuts, saying this was a program started by the Biden administration to help farmers during the pandemic, and that now it is no longer needed.
It's been a month since Elon Musk left Washington, but the impact of his Doge budget cutting is just beginning to be felt. In tonight's Eye on America, Meg Oliver looks at the real-life impact of eliminating 2 programs that helped feed the hungry.
4 days a week, Miley Otterson and an employee drive hundreds of miles across Kansas, Missouri, and Arkansas, delivering fresh produce to food deserts.
Those are gorgeous.
Her nonprofit helps underserved schools, food pantries, and senior centers, such as this one in Ava, Missouri, where for many, it's the only place to get a hot meal.
We're trying the best we can without the funding.
Otterson's nonprofit relies on USDA grants to distribute produce to schools in low-income communities. But in March, the USDA abruptly canceled those 2 national food programs implemented by the Biden administration in response to the pandemic and totaling $1 billion. The agency says it's a decision to return to long-term, fiscally responsible initiatives.
Who are you leaving out there without food?
Some of the most food insecure people, some of the most vulnerable people, children, the elderly.
The USDA has said these were pandemic relief programs, and that's over, so it's time to move on.
Yeah, we are not past the effects of the pandemic.
The USDA grants helped Otterson buy food from small farms such as Liz Grasnick's.
It was devastating. I don't know those families, but I know those families are desperate for the food that they were getting.
The subsidies implemented in 2022 were set to be extended for another 3 years.
When they introduced these programs, how did it impact your farm?
It was huge. I knew I could produce this and that they would be able and interested in buying it.
She rented an extra 16 acres to harvest more onions, garlic, and peppers to keep up with demand.
A quarter of my annual sales were going to those programs. And when they said that that money is gone, I thought, oh my God, well, now what do I do?
Nationwide, more than 8,000 small farmers were supported by the programs. Advocates warn the cuts could ripple through food deserts, rural communities, and urban areas where access to healthy food is miles away. With food insecurity in Missouri above the national average at 15%, local farmers here help bridge the gap.
Will you be able to still feed people this year?
We are going to, but not nearly as many. Head them up, move them out.
Leaving farmers and frontline workers to pick up the pieces while people go hungry. For Eye on America, I'm Meg Oliver in Jamestown, Missouri.